Hello, and in this video we're going to be talking about the birth of the symphony. How did the symphony come to be the absolute centre of our concert programmes today? We even talk about the symphony concert, as if all we go to the concert for is to listen to the symphonies. Well, it wasn't always like that, and in fact in the 18th century, when the symphony really began, it was often a very unimportant part of the concert programme. Sometimes it wasn't even called a symphony. In fact, here we have one of the earliest printed editions of symphonies held in the UK. This one's from the Bodleian Library in Oxford, 1773, and it's called Overtures, not symphonies at all. Overtures in 8 parts, that's 4 strings, 4 wind, could be played by 8 people, doesn't have to be played by a large number of people at all. And it's by a list of famous composers of the day: Stamitz, Van Hal, Miss Leverchek, the Princess Royal of Saxony, and Haydn. Although things on the cover aren't always what they seem, and in fact, where it says Haydn, that's a symphony by somebody else altogether. The one by Van Hal, on the other hand, is by Haydn. It's one of the symphonies we know today. In the middle, though, there is a woman composer. I always like pointing out female composers, and this one is Anna Amalia of Brunswick-Wolfenbüttel, an aristocratic lady, but also a very talented musician. Now, I think it's very unlikely that people listen to a whole of a symphony and then 3 concert arias, one after another. It's much more likely they split the symphony up and played movements in between the others. We don't actually know that, but it seems likely from the way that symphony concerts worked at the time. And to show you exactly what I mean, let's go to London. So here we are in London in April 1795, the last season that Haydn spent in the capital of Britain. Haydn said that his years in London were the happiest of his professional life, and this concert was almost at the end of his last season. It's another benefit concert, this time for decayed musicians and their widows and orphans. And what is it that they're benefiting from in this grand, miscellaneous concert of vocal and instrumental music? Well, it's in 2 halves called Act 1 and Act 2. Concerts at this time were very much like going to the opera. And in this concert, Act 1 and the end of the concert are full of arias and sung pieces, lots of them by Handel, 1 or 2 by other people. That's what people are coming to the concert for, is to hear things getting sung. It's not to listen to symphonies. Haydn, however, has got his symphony in at the beginning of Act 2. Again, it's like an overture. It's opening up the second half of the concert. It's a new symphony, we know, because it's in manuscript and given under his immediate direction, which means that Haydn would have sat at the keyboard, the harpsichord or piano, and played along, directing the symphony from there. The symphony is becoming gradually more important, though, and we can see that from another concert just a couple of weeks later, May 1795, when Dr. Haydn takes out an advert in the paper to request the attendance of the nobility and gentry at another concert, which he is putting on. And this is another mixture. There's an overture at the beginning, there's the military symphony, the big hit of the season in fact, beginning the second half, but what people are really coming to hear are the vocal pieces, a whole new concert aria written by Haydn for the occasion, and also concertos, an oboe concerto in the first half, a violin concerto in the second half. The overture at the beginning, though, we know exactly what piece that was. We know this because Haydn wrote it down in his notebook a day or so after the concert had taken place. So the symphony is not played all together, it's played one movement at the beginning and the rest to open up the second half. And in fact, when you hear the end of that first movement, you just want to stand up and applaud. And in fact, for many, many years after that, even when symphonies are played generally all at once, the end of the first movement is often like that. It gives a great call for applause to the audience, and the tradition was well into the 20th century that audiences would applaud at the end of at least the first movement, sometimes at the end of each movement. So in this concert, the last concert ever given by Haydn in London, they actually played a whole symphony all the way through. The last symphony that Haydn composed in London, the 12th and last of those I have written here, he says. It's now called the London Symphony. So it's gradually becoming more important. In fact, as symphonies stopped being called just overtures, the number of symphonies getting written dropped. In fact, the number of symphonies written in the whole history of writing symphonies went down at the end of the 18th century and is at its lowest point in the first 2 decades of the 19th century. Then it starts going up again. But who is it who writes all his symphonies in exactly those 2 decades? It's Beethoven. Not only was Beethoven one of the greatest composers of symphonies ever to have lived, but he wrote into a vacuum at a time when people wanted new, grand symphonies to be the centrepiece of a concert programme. And that's one reason why Beethoven's symphonies became the touchstone of quality right through the 19th century, and it has to be confessed really, up to our present day. Even as late as the 1840s, that's 20 years after Beethoven died, the critic of the Berlin musical newspaper was saying, first of all, why should anybody program a symphony that's not written by Beethoven, because you don't listen to his symphonies often enough? And secondly, when we play a Beethoven symphony, why on earth don't we play all of its movements? In other words, the debate over playing the whole of a symphony altogether and whether you should make the symphony the centrepiece of a programme went on and on. Today we know the symphony is at the centre of our concert life, but it only got there gradually and it needed a bit of help from one of its greatest exponents.